Hello, and thank you for having us. We are into our second year of receiving competitive funding from the Bureau of Indian Affairs Intertribal Subsistence Cooperative Management Program that focuses on Alaska subsistence projects, and we are so thankful for this funding because it has not just launched but catapulted Circ into the fish and wildlife co-management space. Before receiving this funding, we had been piecemealing support for our member tribes from a variety of different funding sources, but it was choppy at best. When this funding opportunity came up, we focused on developing a comprehensive program that would provide for a foundation for effective co-management and carry out Title VIII of the Alaska National Interest Land Conservation Act, or ANILCA, on federal lands in Alaska. Since we began, we've been able to hire critical staff to further our mission, which you will meet later. Those include an intertribal liaison, a fish and wildlife coordinator, a marine mammal program manager, and a fish and wildlife biologist. We hope to add more staff in the future. With this support, we have also been able to organize what we call the Southcentral Intertribal Subsistence Cooperative Management Alliance, or as we refer to it, the Alliance. The objectives of this group are to protect the well-being of the Chugach people by protecting Alaska Native hunting and fishing rights, including the harvesting and sharing of fish, game, and other resources, ensure Alaska Native management of traditional lands and resources, and to speak and act with a unified voice at regulatory meetings. You will hear more about these meetings and advocacy work later in the presentation. And lastly, we've been able to partner with the UAF Tribal College to host college-level courses on fish and wildlife management and effective means and methods for meaningful advocacy and co-management. Thank you for listening, and please reach out to any of our staff if you have any questions or would like to get involved with our work.
To ground us in the work we do through this grant application, we are honored to present this quote from our Chairman of the Board and Chief of the Port Graham Village Council, Patrick Norman. Our tribes in the past have been nomadic, which is an English term, but the way you explain it is exactly how our people were. We were not stuck to where we are now. We were spread out all the way from Prince William Sound to Lower Cook Inlet and other places, and got drawn into being in these one places during the Russian period. Then, when the canneries came around and more permanent residencies were established where we are now, but even during that time our elders were still going out and doing their traditional hunting and harvesting in the spring and summer, even though they were needed in the canneries. They maintained those traditions of going where they knew the animals and sea life were. The elders were so in tune with everything they used. They knew when to move to another area to let those resources build back up over time. That type of management of the resources that we use contradicts what we must follow now with the Western culture, where it is based on the Western model, based on my experiences of dealing with it. I look at it as if they had need to control what we natives are doing, and at the same time they do that with their own Western cultures. So, it is an ongoing issue on trying to get them to understand our traditional way of doing it and them not fully accepting it, that yeah, we did manage those resources, and accept that when we make a request under their regulations to try and move our harvesting practices back to more traditional times is hard. Trying to get those things understood has been an ongoing issue for us. If they just understand that what we are asking is our observational look at the resources and try to get the best for our people. The Chugach Regional Resource Commission Board of Directors developed a land acknowledgement in which is an opportunity to remember the story that brought us to reside on the land. It is our opportunity to honor the relationship to the places that have been fostered by Indigenous peoples. Where we reside, the relationship we have to the land is a direct result in the actions of those who came before us. If we seek to have a long story on the land, we must understand that we are presently in the story of the land, and the best way to inform our actions for sustainability comes from those who have sustained on the land for thousands of years. Indigenous peoples still reside on our lands through not only our continued presence, but also through the land, plant, and animal relationships that have been in the reciprocity since time immemorial. Naming those who have fostered these connections to the place of our current action is a small token and first step to acknowledging and healing our collective relationships to those places.
Circ is a federally recognized tribal consortia serving as an intertribal fish and wildlife commission for 7 tribes in Prince William Sound and Lower Cook Inlet. The tribes and tribal members of Circ include the Tatitlek Village IRA Council, Native Village of Eyak, Port Graham Village Council, Nanwalek IRA Council, Chenega IRA Council, the Qutekcak Native Tribe, and the Valdez Native Tribe. The 7 tribes of the Chugach Region established Circ in 1984 to serve as the Intertribal Fish and Wildlife Commission to address environmental and natural resource issues of concern to their members. Our mission is to 1. Promote and support tribal management and the development of tribal natural resource management programs. 2. Advocate cooperation with private, state, and federal resource management agencies. 3. Develop and enhance natural resource management education and training. And 4. Promote sustainable and sound economic development. Circ also assists its member tribes in developing their technical capacity to be more meaningfully involved in the environmental and natural resource decisions and regulations that affect their traditional use and resources. We also operate the Alliance Pride Marine Institute, which is located in Seward, Alaska. It is the only tribal shellfish hatchery in the state. We have been in operation since the early 1990s and have been providing many services to our tribes over the years, one of which is raising shellfish for direct beach seeding on community beaches. While we primarily serve the 7 tribes of the Chugach region, we are also actively engaged with tribes across the state on various resource issues, including migratory birds, marine mammals, fisheries, and climate change. Circ is a member of the Indigenous Peoples Council on Marine Mammals and the Alaska Migratory Bird Co-Management Council. We see ourselves as a leader in tribal natural resource issues in Southcentral Alaska. Our organization was integrally involved in the research, monitoring, and restoration projects resulting from the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and we worked with all tribes in the oil-spilled area. We have since expanded our programs to include playing a leading role in the management of subsistence resources, shellfish aquaculture, and ocean acidification research in the region. We cover a large area, which is not unique to tribal consortia in Alaska, but it's complicated. Nanwalek and Port Graham are surrounded by state of Alaska lands. Qutekcak is in a non-rural area. Chenega and Tatitlek are surrounded by the Chugach National Forest, and the Valdez Native Tribe is also in a non-rural area. Lastly, the Native Village of Eyak has a combination of state and federal lands surrounding the community. What does this mean? It means that we cannot apply a singular fish and wildlife management scheme to each community. We have to work with the state, the feds, private landowners to ensure effective management of subsistence resources and ways of life. It also means and equals a lot of fun and a lot of work. In the Chugach region alone, there are many federal landowners responsible for federal subsistence management under Title VIII of ANILCA, including the Forest Service, the National Park Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Bureau of Land Management. Federal lands account for over 72% of all land ownership in the region. That's an incredibly high number. The goal of this program is to meet with land management agencies to plan and build capacity and implement cooperative agreements with those land managers. The Alaska Native people of the region are known as Aluktik or Sukbiak, and they are the southern coastal people of Alaska. As we mentioned before, the 7 tribes are located in Prince William Sound and Lower Cook Inlet. It's a region that's largely limited to travel to small aircraft, charter aircraft, and boat with seasonal Alaska Marine Highway service. There has been several tragic incidents that have impacted the traditional subsistence way of life. The March 27, 1964, 9.2 magnitude earthquake destroyed the village of Chenega, resulting in a relocation of the entire community. And there were many other impacts from that tragic day. In 1989, the oil tanker Exxon Valdez ran aground not far from the village of Tatitlek and spilled millions of gallons of crude oil to the waters of Prince William Sound. All of the communities in the Circ region harvest on both federal and state lands and waters, but the majority of subsistence harvest is on federally managed land. Residents of all communities use a wide variety of fish and wildlife in their area, including black bear, brown bear, caribou, goat, moose, sheep, and deer, all 5 species of salmon, halibut, and trout. The intrinsic value of harvesting local food in traditional ways cannot be overstated. When our tribal members lose connection to their food, they lose a part of their culture, which can have negative effects on psyche. Circ hopes these resources can serve as a reminder of the importance of traditional foods for Alaska Natives and as a guide for tackling environmental issues affecting the Chugach region of Alaska, and for anyone working with natural resources who hope to collect more information on issues affecting tribal lands and people.
Alaska Native people have maintained food sovereignty since time immemorial through the important natural resources. Alaska Natives are stewards of animals, plants, and earth. The sustainable management practices were so successful and large in scale that as the colonizers arrived, it was mistaken as unmanaged. To ensure the continued abundance and diversity needed for the health of this world, it is paramount to integrate traditional ecological knowledge into conservation strategies. There is an important balance of human needs with management. Conservation programs could be strengthened through the sharing of traditional knowledge surrounding what activities should be permitted, restricted, or prohibited. The identity of the Chugach region is shaped around our subsistence resources. We have learned the animals' behaviors, the seasons of harvesting, how to hunt successfully, where to find fish, what is edible, how to store food, and how to create arts and crafts from the inedible parts. These skills are handed down from generation to generation and are vital to our culture, food sustainability, and economic well-being. It is important to the identity of our people that this traditional ecological knowledge continues to be shared. This project encourages systematic change and participation in subsistence harvesting in Alaska. Because Alaska Native groups continue to define themselves as a large degree by the traditions in obtaining, processing, and distributing wild resources, they see the maintenance of these cultural traditions and laws as an essential element to their subsistence. Natives take responsibility for one another and for changing subsistence law. While Natives define the subsistence trend to be broader and more holistic, non-Native conceptions are typically more restrictive. Many adhere to the popular dictionary definition of subsistence as the minimum food or shelter necessary to support life. Subsistence is more time-honored, largely self-regulating traditions among Alaskan Natives. Subsistence is more synonymous with culture, identity, and self-determination. Every year, tens of thousands of Alaska Natives harvest, process, distribute, and consume millions of pounds of wild animals, fish, and plants through an economy and way of life that has come to be termed subsistence. Collectively, these varied subsistence activities constitute a way of being and relating to the world, and thus comprise an essential component of Alaska Native identities and cultures. Native Alaskans would like to see customary and traditional subsistence activities continue, but they cannot endure without legal protections. While some safeguards to subsistence have been passed through federal and state laws, many challenges remain in the effort to chart an effective subsistence policy for Alaska Native people. In the end, however, more than terminology, it is the conflicting cultural visions, a Native one based on cultural identity, customs, and traditional values, and a non-Native based on individual rights and economic need. That continues to polarize the subsistence debate. Although federal management may bring better protection to Native subsistence activities in the short run, it is a fragile solution. Indigenous groups will continue to seek greater sovereignty and self-determination and do whatever it takes to sustain their families, customs, and traditions. To be an effective public policy, subsistence must not be viewed simply as an allocation scheme or as the preservation of an archaic lifestyle in the changing world. Rather, it should be understood as a means of sustaining and promoting healthy relationships between communities and their lands and resource-based. It is a life-enriching process. Although this research will be specific to Southcentral Region that Circ serves, it will provide a helpful baseline for all other regions in the state to conduct the same research and expand to others in the future for comparison.
Circ has a small but skilled team of staff who work on this project. Myself, Willow, I'm the executive director. I have over 10 years of experience managing natural resources in the Chugach region, including overseeing and implementing this grant. I serve on the Public Advisory Committee to the Board of Fish and Board of Game in Anchorage that meets to discuss fish and wildlife issues. Ms. Raven Cunningham is Circ's Marine Mammal Program Manager and sits on the Native Village of Eyak's Alaska Native Fishermen's Alliance. She received her bachelor's degree from the University of Alaska Fairbanks in Alaska Native Studies and Rural Development with a concentration in natural resource management. Raven has 8 years of professional tribal government and ANCSA corporation experience combined with a lifetime of local knowledge of Alaska's history and local natural resources. Her work experience started at an early age, working with her family on their commercial fishing operations, both drift, gillnet, and seine fishing. Ms. Christine Brummer is Circ's Fish and Wildlife Coordinator and focuses on fish and wildlife regulations and advocacy for the Chugach Region's 7 tribes. She assists in running the Federal Subsistence Program. She has a bachelor's degree from the University of Alaska in anthropology and another in environmental studies, and is currently working on a master's degree in applied cultural anthropology. She has experience with the federal system through working for the National Park Service, Office of Environmental Policy and Compliance, and the Office of Subsistence Management. Christine's main goal with her position at Circ is to support the tribal members. Dustin Carl is Circ's Fish and Wildlife Biologist and helps with monitoring programs and projects in each community. Dustin has a background and knowledge in regulatory issues and attending meetings for the Board of Fish, Board of Game, Southcentral Regional Advisory Committee, and the Federal Subsistence Board. Dustin was born in rural Alaska. He grew up traveling all across the state and is very excited to spend some time in South Central. Allison Carl is Circ's research scientist on loan to us from the Chugach Alaska Corporation through their apprenticeship program. She has been helping support various programs with Circ and has been developing her knowledge on the Federal Subsistence Board regulatory process and the Southcentral Region's wildlife management issues.
For thousands of years, Alaska Natives have harvested fish and wildlife resources for food, shelter, clothing, transportation, handicrafts, and trade. Subsistence remains an important source of healthy food, a vital part of rural economies, and a central cultural activity to this day. Over the years, a series of laws and lawsuits have resulted in an existing dual management system for fish and wildlife resources in Alaska. Federal and state regulations differ in who can qualify for subsistence harvests and have established different management bodies to set regulations. The result is a complex management process that requires significant time and resources to engage with as an informed participant. Circ members have expressed frustration with this process, saying it is difficult to navigate, and even when they try to engage, they feel that their voices are not heard. In response, Circ formed an Intertribal Federal Subsistence Cooperative Management Alliance in 2020 to assist rural tribes with navigating the Federal Subsistence Board regulatory process. Under federal regulations, the regional advisory councils have broad authority to develop proposals, engage with the public, and make recommendations to the Federal Subsistence Board. This alliance will work with federal agencies to develop strategies to protect the well-being of the Chugach people, increase Alaska Native influence and regulation and policymaking at the federal level, and enhance Alaska Native wild resource management capacity through training and technical assistance. Additionally, this Intertribal Federal Subsistence Cooperative Management Alliance has helped member tribes become more involved with existing forums for public participation involving the Southcentral Regional Advisory Council in order to elevate tribal voices in the management process. Until March 31st, 2022, we had an intertribal liaison on staff, but we're now in search for a replacement for this position, and we hope to hire somebody soon. Monthly meetings are held during the first Wednesday of every month. These meetings allow the Alliance the space to provide fish and wildlife harvesting community updates for each Circ's 7 tribes. These meetings are also focused on upcoming regulatory meetings and the opportunity to solicit approval to provide oral and/or written comments or testimony. When available, the Alliance invites guest speakers to discuss statewide advocacy efforts. So far this year, meetings have been held on January 5th, February 2nd, and March 2nd. Diane Slavinoff joined us at the January 5th meeting as our special guest speaker. Our next Alliance meeting is scheduled for April 6th, and the Office of Subsistence Management Native Liaison, Orville Lind, will be our special guest speaker. Circ staff try to hold meetings with at least 2 management agencies monthly to build relationships and find ways to work towards partnerships when possible. Capacity building and implementing cooperative agreements with land managers are goals of Circ. Circ staff met virtually with the National Park Service staff on January 19th to discuss partnerships and continue relationship building. Circ staff met virtually with the Fish and Wildlife staff to discuss the Tribal Wildlife Grant on February 15th. And Circ staff also met virtually with the Kenai Fjords National Park and Preserve staff to discuss future partnerships and potential future projects on February 17th. No meetings were held in March because Circ staff were attending the Board of Game statewide meeting, the joint Southcentral Eastern Interior Regional Advisory Council meeting, the Board of Fish, Shellfish, and Shrimp meeting, preparing presentations for and attending the Alaska Food Policy Festival and Conference, and preparing for Circ's 20th Annual Memorial Gathering, which took place on March 24th. Circ staff attend the following meetings annually: the Federal Subsistence Board, Southcentral Regional Advisory Council, the Board of Fish, and the Board of Game. The staff also try to communicate with at least one Southcentral Regional Advisory Council and/or regional team member monthly, attend the University of Alaska Fairbanks Tribal Management Program courses yearly, and attend at least 3 conferences focused on wildlife management and/or food sovereignty yearly. Circ staff attended the Federal Subsistence Board session, Board of Game work session, and the DOI consultation sessions in January. Circ staff attended the Southcentral Regional Advisory Council meeting in February, and Circ staff attended the Board of Game statewide meeting and the Board of Fish, Shellfish, and Shrimp meeting in March. Circ staff communicated with the Office of Subsistence Management Policy Coordinator, Robin Levine, on February 11th about Chenega and salmon permits. Circ staff also communicated with the Office of Subsistence Management Wildlife Division Supervisor Lisa Gredigan on February 23rd and March 3rd about OSM's presentation to Circ's 20th Annual Memorial Gathering event that occurred on March 24th. A UAF Tribal Management Program course will be held in fall 2022, and we're shooting for a course on co-management. Circ staff attended the following conferences so far this year: the Alaska Marine Science Symposium, the Alaska Forum on the Environment, and the Alaska Food Policy Festival and Conference. Circ staff provide digital synopsis of development trainings and meetings and deadlines related to the federal subsistence process to the Alliance monthly via Canva calendars. These calendars are updated monthly and sent out to the Alliance members via email with the Alliance meeting agenda. The Alliance is provided with updates on state and federal advisory council meetings, board meetings, and proposals. Circ staff provide written or oral testimony at the Southcentral Regional Advisory Council, Federal Subsistence Board, Board of Fish, and the Board of Game when proposals may affect our tribes and tribal members. So far this year, we have called attention to the Board of Game call for wildlife proposals, and Circ is working on a moose proposal for Game Management Unit 15C, which will be submitted before the April 29th deadline. The federal call for fish and non-rural proposals was published in the Federal Register on March 17th, and Circ staff let the Alliance know about this on April 6th at the Alliance meeting. Circ staff also provides at least one informal flyer poster on federal and state hunting opportunities for species of interest in South Central. Information posters that Circ has been working on and have completed for this year include posters on federal and state hunting opportunities for fur bearers, small game, bear, and marine mammals. Circ staff updates the Circ website yearly. Updates to the website are currently underway. We are also seeking a GIS specialist to create an ArcGIS storyboard map with fishing and hunting opportunities for Circ's tribal federally qualified subsistence users. A scope of work document has been created and a call for a GIS specialist will go out on April 1st. Circ will contract a GIS specialist to create a story map with fishing and hunting opportunities in South Central Alaska. Circ plans to have a GIS specialist working on the story map by June 2022. Here are 3 examples of Circ's advocating for our tribes. The Native Village of Eyak submitted Board of Fish Proposal 28 and 29 during the 2021 call for proposals. The Board of Fish took up these proposals on November through December 2021 Board of Fish meeting in Cordova. Circ staff provided oral testimony at the meeting in support of the Native Village of Eyak's proposal. The Board of Fish supported both of these proposals with modifications. The Native Village of Chenega submitted Board of Fish Proposals 26 and 27 during the 2021 call for proposals, and these proposals were also taken up by the Board of Fish during their November-December 2021 Board of Fish meeting in Cordova. Circ staff provided oral public testimony at that meeting in support of the Native Village of Chenega's proposals. The Board of Fish opposed Proposal 26 and took no action on Proposal 27. The board did advise the Native Village of Chenega to think about seeking a state educational permit, and that is something that is being considered currently. In 2019, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game published a special publication known as Customary Traditional Use Workshop Moose Unit 15C, which was created to address the Alaska Board of Game Proposals 63 through 66, 72 through 79, and 83 for the March 2019 South Central meetings to address moose hunting regulations and Game Management Unit 15C. In March 1987, the Board of Game had made a positive customary and traditional use determination for the use of moose by residents of Port Graham and Nanwalek, and they established a registration hunt on the portion of Game Management Unit 15C southwest of a line from Point Pagushi to a point of land between Rocky Bay and Windy Bay. The hunting is allowed between August 25th through September 30th. This hunt is known as the Tier 2 Subsistence Hunt, or TM 549. Circ submitted a Moose 15C proposal to the Board of Game in 2018, requesting that the board extend the moose hunting season in order to increase hunter opportunity in the area because inconsistent weather conditions were limiting hunting during the scheduled open season of August 25th through September 30th. Circ further argued that the hunters in the area were experiencing effects of climate change at the moose migrating and rutting later in the season. The board was asked to open the season on September 1st through October 1st and on November 1st through the 15th. The board denied this request. Circ is submitting a similar request through the Alaska Department of Fish and Game call for proposal cycle. This call is currently open with a deadline of April 29th. Circ is asking the board to extend the hunting season from September 1st through the 30th and November 1st through the 15th. The request is similar to the 2018 request, however, in this new proposal, Circ has collected moose data from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game to visualize to the board that moose harvest in TM 549 hunt is on the decline.
Over the years, a series of laws and lawsuits have resulted in the existing dual management system for fish and wildlife resources in Alaska. Federal and state regulations differ in who can qualify for subsistence harvest and have established different management bodies to set regulations. The result is a complex management process that requires significant time and resources to understand these regulations. In response to this, Circ developed these posters as a tool to help the community members of our region understand the federal and state regulations in a simpler and more streamlined approach. We developed posters for deer, bear, moose, marine mammals, fur bearers and small game, and the spring and fall migratory bird hunts. These posters include the maps of the game management unit area that the communities are located in, the regulations and season dates of that unit, and infographic icons that are helpful for following the rules and regulations of these specific hunts. The bird and egging regulation posters also include depictions of each species drawn by local artists.
In addition to streamlining regulations with the previously described posters, Circ developed 3 videos to introduce the regulatory processes of the Board of Fish, Board of Game, and the Federal Subsistence Board. These were narrated by some very cool people. The Board of Fish video was narrated by Thomas Sullivan Huntington, who is a writer, artist, and social media content creator from Eagle River, Alaska. The introduction to the Board of Game was narrated by Estelle Thompson, who is a Yupik traditional medicine practitioner, educator, serves on her village's traditional council, and most importantly, a mother to 3 wonderful children. And the voiceover for the Federal Subsistence Board video was done by Henry P. Huntington, who is an Arctic researcher and conservationist. He has worked throughout much of Alaska, including the Chugach Region, as well as the western and northern coasts. You can watch all 3 videos by following the link on the slide. We will also share the introduction on the Federal Subsistence Board next.
Subsistence fishing and hunting is central to life in Alaska. Indigenous communities have relied upon the traditional harvest of wild foods for thousands of years and have passed this way of life down through generations. Subsistence culture has also become important to many non-native Alaskans, particularly in rural Alaska. It's part of the fabric of life here, but getting involved in Alaska's subsistence regulations can be daunting. That's where the Federal Subsistence Board comes in. The Federal Subsistence Board is responsible for ensuring rural Alaskans can continue their subsistence way of life and for maintaining healthy populations of fish and wildlife on federal land. The Federal Subsistence Board has the power to set harvest limits, establish new fisheries and hunts, change harvest seasons, modify the methods of harvest, and more. But it's important to remember that the Federal Subsistence Board relies on the expertise of all Alaskans. You don't have to be a biologist or a politician to make a difference. Your experiences make you an expert. Here are a few ways to get involved. To make regulatory decisions, the Federal Subsistence Board relies on input from locally elected Subsistence Regional Advisory Councils, or RACs, across Alaska. If you're concerned about your subsistence way of life, consider running for a seat on your local Regional Advisory Council. Or attend a meeting to talk with Council and Federal Subsistence Board members and get your concerns on record. In a typical year, the Regional Advisory Councils and Federal Subsistence Board also solicit proposals for new regulations. Changing regulations starts with you, the user. Anyone can submit a proposal, including tribes, businesses, nonprofits, and you. The Federal Subsistence Board considers proposals for changes to fishing regulations in even-numbered years and changes to wildlife regulations in odd-numbered years. If you are concerned about issues that impact your community's ability to harvest, submit a proposal for the Federal Subsistence Board's consideration. After all the proposals have been received, they're internally analyzed and reviewed prior to being made available to the public for review. If you'd like to add your support to a proposal or voice your opposition, send in a written public comment or testify at a Regional Advisory Council meeting. Or better yet, provide testimony directly to the Federal Subsistence Board. Anyone can testify at the meetings, and speaking in front of the Federal Subsistence Board can be a powerful way to get involved. While the Federal Subsistence Board makes the final decision on whether proposals become regulations, public input is critical. By becoming involved in the process, you can help ensure the consideration of traditional and local knowledge. All Alaskans are invited to participate, and adding your voice to the public process can make a real difference for your harvesting practices.
Our governing board is pleased with the outcomes of this funding, and our staff have excelled at completing goals and objectives on time and within budget. Those tasks include maintaining a tribal liaison to the Federal Subsistence Board, continued technical assistance and training to approve collaborations in subsistence management partnerships with neighboring federal agencies. Thank you so much for listening, and please reach out to our staff if you have any questions.